your CV and this presentation was very, very impressive. Could you start by giving us an overview of Silo AI and its mission within the AI landscape?
Happy to do so. And actually, before that, I'm going to say the same as Ansi. It is difficult to not ruin the atmosphere after this great introduction. And I think Denny and Ansi have been putting in a lot of good effort in making this happen. So I think it's exciting to be here. And I look forward to the rest of the day also learning about data spaces. But yes, I mean, we're an AI company. Founded end of 2017, now a bit more than 6 years old. Set up the company as a private AI lab. A few co-founders with background from academia, a few co-founders with background from industry and business. Today we're a company with a bit more than 300 people, almost 350. Majority have a PhD in AI-related fields, so we've kept the spearhead sort of sharp. Still a private AI lab. I usually say that it says more about Europe than it says about us, that we're one of the largest, if not the largest, pure play AI companies in Europe. Yeah, I mean, we help our clients build AI-driven products, and what that means is that we're delivering models, tooling and infrastructure and services to ensure that companies succeed in building AI at the core of their business, at the core of their products.
Well, AI is everywhere nowadays. What specifically does that mean that you're building AI models? Because like everything is AI, right?
That's a very broad question. What is AI? I've usually said that then when we know how to do something, it stops being AI. So, you know, everything from face recognition on your mobile phone when it just unlocks the screen, or driver assistance in your vehicle, and so forth, search engines. You know, that's AI technology that just now is becoming sort of an embedded part of our everyday life. Of course, we can dig deeper into what is the underlying technology behind that, and that's called machine learning, and it's been developing to a sort of, you know, in fairly rapidly lately, but at the same time, I usually say that it's actually a fairly linear and boring process from a scientific perspective, because it hasn't actually been sort of doing jump shifts. The way it sort of looks to the rest of the world might look like a jump shift, but I mean, ultimately, the technology behind AI is just sort of a better function approximators or better A to B mappings. That's literally what machine learning is doing, mapping between an image and a category, mapping between a word and another word, which language models are doing, and so forth.
Well, within the last years, when we have generative AI making sort of breakthroughs, that's when, you know, the regular people like me are kind of getting into AI, but you started your company in 2017. So what inspired you to establish Silo AI, and how does it reflect your vision for European digital sovereignty?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, yeah, indeed, we set up the company with the intent to ensure that Europe has an AI flagship, and on a mission to of course build one. But that's what we believe Europe needs. Of course, the Nordics and Finland and so forth as well. I think it's still very relevant today that it happens. I'm still not sort of entirely sure that it's obvious that Europe will have a leading AI company, a sort of an AI champion. But that was the sort of intent. You know, I think ultimately then there's a lot of things that need to happen for that to actually materialize. And the way we looked at that was that it's a mission for the 2030s. So company founded in 2017, it implies that we're sort of on a have a long-term perspective to building that AI flagship. And you know, that is the mission we are on. And of course it requires many things. I mean, we've now as was indicated earlier, we've now been building open source large language models, or the same technology that sort of lies behind ChatGPT and such. And that's really with the intent to ensure that there exists a digital infrastructure that these models create, on top of which companies in Europe can innovate. And then, there's sort of many drivers behind that. There are many details that we need to get sort of correct to actually succeed in that.
Okay, and this is called Silo Gen, but what are the key challenges that you're finding with creating an open source LLM?
Well, I've previously said that you need 3 ingredients to be able to create AI. So that would be data, compute, and talent. I think if I not only answer the question from the perspective of Silo and us, but I mean overall, I think in Europe we're in a good position given the fact that we have some of the most powerful supercomputers like Lumi, which is Europe's most powerful and was, I think, the 3rd most powerful in the world. I think today is the 5th most powerful in the world, and then many others. I think we're doing pretty well. Then, of course, we need talent, and I think the talent is a sort of we're partly doing well. Our universities in Europe are sort of producing world-class research and well ranked, but then I think it's not obvious whether we can retain all of that talent when it actually sort of moves to industry. And then the third, which I guess is relevant for this audience, is data. I think we're sort of doing well, but it's just a much more challenging environment given the fact that we're not only serving one large language, but or a high resource language, but we're serving many languages. And I think that's an element where we actually need a number of initiatives, and data spaces, of course, is one. And then, ultimately, we can create beautiful models, and not only we, but others as well. How do they actually create value? Models and AI isn't creating value on its own and in itself, in isolation. Models and AI is creating value as part of digital services and products when it actually becomes an embedded part of a software product. That's how it's happened always, and that's how it's happening now. ChatGPT is a product, GitHub Copilot is a product, Microsoft Copilot or Microsoft 365 is a product, and that has a distribution for these models. And for European companies to actually benefit from whatever technology or infrastructure we build or others build here, we need to sort of ensure that we have software product companies and software platforms and so forth. So it really sort of ensuring that there is something that allows us to distribute the value that AI creates. And I think that's sort of still an element where we are lagging behind in Europe.
So we talked about data and data sources. Can you elaborate on how Silo AI gets its data?
Yeah.
No is also an answer. I don't.
I think the key question is, why do you need data? Like, what do you do with data? And then ultimately you sort of collect and you get data for various different purposes, right? I think if you look at sort of today, and I said, Silo has been called the boring AI company as well from time to time because we haven't really been riding the hype. And I mean, I think, yes, so most things have not actually changed. But one thing has changed, and that's the use of foundation models, which basically means that you use these very, very large machine learning or AI models that function as a basis on top of which you eventually then create downstream applications, which basically implies that there's not only us, but a lot of players out there building these foundation models with vast amounts of data, usually scraped from the internet, usually sort of collected from various sources. And I think then the question is sort of who should own these models. And our perspective has been that this is a digital infrastructure. Ultimately, all of us have created this data in various ways. And those models should be open source. So we're fully committed to open source. We release under Apache 2 all of our models. We're releasing not only model weights, we're releasing the training code, we're releasing the architecture, we're releasing checkpoints throughout training, we're releasing the data that we use, and so forth. And I think that's sort of, that's one answer to your question. Then the other part is that I think every single company has proprietary data that is eventually competitive edge for them. That's ultimately lying behind what they can do in AI that others can't do in AI. And I truly believe that data is a differentiator going ahead. These base models, foundation models, large language models, they are converging. You know, whoever builds them, xAI or Cohere or Anthropic or OpenAI or Silo, basically, if we use the same data, we're going to have similar models. And then I think it becomes crucial sort of how you utilize your data as a company on top of that.
Well, what could that data be if you've already scraped the entire internet? What could that competitive data be that someone else doesn't have?
Well, to me, that's sort of obvious. It's a very different thing to sort of scrape data from the internet and use proprietary data that you've been curating and you've been collecting for a very specific purpose, where you're owning usually what I call closed loop data. So you're owning basically also the feedback on that data, and that allows you to build sort of models at the center of that becomes better and better and better over time. And that's been, Mark Andreessen said in 2011 that software is eating traditional industries. And that's through network effects and platform economy and so forth. And I think that's what's been happening. So Spotify, Netflix, Amazon, and so forth. But at the core of those, there's been machine learning and AI, where you're sort of continuously collecting more data and building better models at the core of that. But yes, I think there's sort of opportunity in between as well. And I guess that's sort of partly what data spaces is about.
So what I'm hearing you say is sort of data is going to be the one crucial thing that is going to be the one that makes or breaks a company. But how is Silo AI partnering around data?
Yeah, so I think partnering is you can define that on many levels, but I would still sort of really differentiate in terms of what sort of public data. What we believe is that if you're sort of using the data that all of us here have produced, then ultimately, that should be, or that should result in open source models. And then you can sort of, you can partner up around that in various ways. And then there's this sort of proprietary part. And that's usually something that we believe companies should own. And basically, the way we operate is that we've built now the first model, Poro, which covers English, Finnish, and programming languages. We released last week a model called Viking, or model family called Viking, which includes, in addition to English, Finnish, and programming languages, also the Nordic languages. And the way we look at it is that basically we are offering a platform to allow companies to build own sovereign large language models, own sovereign models that they own the data, and ultimately sort of they ensure that they're fine-tuned or they're trained, they're built, optimized for the specific purpose at hand. And that's what we ultimately believe when it comes to proprietary data. But as I said earlier, I do think there is a need to also look at this from, for instance, an industry perspective, and ensure that we, a little bit in line with foundation models overall, create sort of infrastructure, create models that enable value creation for specific industries.
Right. So, well, if we're looking into the future, what implications do you foresee for these data spaces that you mentioned?
Yeah, so that's what I was alluding to. So I think, I mean, as I said in the beginning, I'm here to learn. So you tell me. Um, but I think there is an, if I look at the need, and also partly what I believe is also how this is going to develop. Um, Foundation models, large language models, and but also, I mean, foundation models is now referring mostly to language, but I mean, foundation models has originally actually been about images, and it's going to be about, and it is already today about other modalities. We're just not talking so much about them, but then ultimately, I think there's a need for also an industry perspective. And that's also what is partly happening at the moment, and partly what we are also involved in looking at these sort of open source based models as a starting point, and then ultimately building domain specific or industry specific, vertical specific or horizontal specific layers on top. And I think, you know, that's an opportunity where it would make sense for many organizations to sort of pool their data, and ultimately build, or say do continued pre-training of these foundation models for specific domains, and that then creates an infrastructure which is not sort of the proprietary or competitive edge for that individual organization, but allows sort of a baseline on top of which you can innovate. And I think that's going to happen. Then the question is whether sort of we do that together, or whether some other entities are building proprietary domain-specific models.
Some other entities,
Such as some of the big tech companies, such as it could be startups, but you know, I eventually think that it's a question whether we want to sort of support the existence of widely available models for this purpose, or whether they will be closed source and only accessible to a few companies, or the value of them accessible to a few companies in the world.
so you definitely think that industries would benefit from forming some sort of a consortium pooling the data?
I do, but I still want to learn how data spaces is going to solve that.
Excellent. Okay, we have a couple more minutes, but can you share what is next up for you in Silo AI?
Next up, it's been a busy 6 years, growing from 6 co-founders to now 350 people, and operating also outside of Helsinki. Majority of our clients are elsewhere, and our, you know, some of our largest offices are elsewhere. I would say 2 things. One is that we are sort of growing in the DACH region at the moment, and our sort of plans to continue internationalization are there, and that's going to be one part of it. But then I guess the more exciting part is our initiatives related to language models. We, as I said, released last week the Nordic model. We are training at the moment a model that covers all official EU languages and programming languages, and I'm personally very excited about what we are seeing together with clients in terms of opportunities. I mean, I think to ensure that these open source models are tackling the language diversity that we have in Europe, and ensure that the underlying data is representative to the regions, the culture, values, but especially the languages, is important for many reasons. But ultimately, I think it's important sort of to do that as these open source models, because that's a way that allows European companies, Nordic companies, Finnish companies to build models on top that ensure that value is sort of kept in within those organizations, within those regions, and I think, you know, that's what we're seeing happening now in Finland, in the Nordics, with the first models. So we have companies innovating on top of these open source models, building, integrating them into patient record systems, integrating them into, customer support software, integrating them into a wide range of different software products where these becomes features of the software product and help us in our everyday life. And I think expanding to now all European languages and expanding to a wider market is going to be exciting.
It does sound exciting. All right, we're minus 40 seconds. Peter, you're going to stick around for the day, right?
I will stick around, but I need to leave in a few hours.
It's fine. You don't have to give details. What are you going to do? No, I'm kidding. Why? No. But so you are going to be here for the networking. So if you do have questions, which we don't have time for right now, you can probably come and ask you, or maybe, I don't know, contact you on.
Indeed. Why don't you tell me how data spaces is going to solve the need for domain-specific foundation models?
Okay, not now though, later. So let's give a giant round of applause. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.